Richard McAllister, Supervising Scientist. No comments from me. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go straight to questions. Senator Lovell.
Welcome back. I wouldn't mind if I could. I'm just going to put a quick question to you, Senator Birmingham, just chasing up some follow-up from the last session. 27 May, you made a commitment to pursue some answers from the Department of Industry and ERA, the company that operates the Ranger uranium mine in Kakadu, regarding how the Commonwealth evaluates the adequacy of the rehabilitation security bond and the cost of rehabilitation. Do you recall off the top of your head that undertaking?
I recall it, Senator, and I do recall asking the department to seek some further information from industry at the time. I can't recall the detail of the information that came back. I know some detail did come back. I can't recall the detail sufficient to explain to you now the process they undertake, but I can say that I was satisfied at the time that sufficient safeguards are in place.
Just to clarify, when you made that undertaking, I was presuming you're undertaking to provide the information to us, not doing some homework on your own behalf. Can you confirm whether any material was made available to the committee or to myself? I'm not aware that it was, but...
Well, Senator, you're aware as well as everybody else around here that the committee secretariats compose a list of questions taken on notice after these estimates hearings. Now, all answers taken on notice have been provided.
Okay, so you don't consider...
I can't recall the exact Hansard transcript from the time, but if you would like me to take it on notice now and actually provide a response based on what information I may have sought. Certainly, Senator...
This feels a bit pedantic,
in an exchange such as the nature we had, for me to have said, yes, I'll go away and look at it, is not necessarily a commitment that I'm taking a question on notice and providing information back to the committee.
Let's be specific.
If that's what I say, if I say I'm taking it on notice, then I'll take it on notice. If I say we'll bring information back to the committee, that's what we'll do. But if I said, yes, Senator, I'll go away and reassure myself, well, that's what I do.
Okay. Can I, just to short circuit this taking another 10 months, can I just ask you, please, now...
We have had estimates hearings since then, Senator, if you'd wanted to ask before you throw the 10 months figure around.
I'm asking you now. Could you just make an undertaking to provide us, which should be reasonably quick if that dossier was assembled for you quite a period of time ago now, could you just provide the basis of your confidence in the company's ability that it's got the bond salted away that it's going to need and that the requirements are appropriate? Could you please provide that on notice to the committee at your earliest convenience?
Certainly, Senator. Well, I should say, yes, Senator, I'm sure we will take it on notice, and obviously I'm not a minister responsible in this portfolio anymore, but best endeavours to provide that will certainly be made at the earliest convenience, as with all questions on notice.
Thank you. So, on page 19 of the company's 2014 annual report, they effectively, again, as they did in their 2013 annual report, they make potential rehabilitation funding conditional on the opening of the Ranger 3 Deep's underground operation. Is that concern... I'll put this firstly to you, Senator Birmingham, representing the executive. Does that concern the government that the company has openly now admitted on at least 2 occasions in its annual filings that it may not have enough money to complete the rehabilitation?
Well, Senator, I'll let Mr McAllister or others talk through the detailed undertakings that have been required of the company to ensure that appropriate rehabilitation can be undertaken, including the bond that they're required to have in place. Obviously, the company is obliged to make certain statements and provisions under corporations law through their reporting mechanisms, including through their annual report. but they, so far as I'm aware, continue to meet all of the obligations that are required of them under their environmental approvals and mining approvals in relation to site rehabilitation.
All right, I understand that. Senator Birmingham, I'm just confirming to you, the company is indicating twice now in its annual reports that it may not be able to meet its future obligations, just to be clear.
Well,
That's the concern. that
So
I'm
Senator
putting to
Ludlam,
you.
you're choosing to paraphrase an annual report there.
I can read it directly. ERA may require an additional source of funding to fully fund the rehabilitation of the Ranger project area. They're
Right.
setting out the possibility
Well,
that if the mine doesn't expand, which will involve mining after they're meant to be
Senator,
cleaning the site up.
that statement in no way suggests to me that ERA are not accepting of their responsibility.
They're accepting of the responsibility. They don't know how they're going to pay
ERA's
for it.
primary shareholder, as we all know around this table, is Rio Tinto, for example.
The legal
who have
obligation resides
relatively-
with ERA.
And that statement from ERA that you have quoted does not suggest to me that they are saying they would not be meeting their responsibilities. It simply says they may require other sources of revenue, which it sounds to me like they would be expecting to source if that were required.
All right. This has actually drifted off into a bit of a hypothetical, so let's maybe to you, Mr. McAllister. Let's come back a little bit. In the same annual report, 2014 annual report, ERA has downgraded its estimated rehabilitation liability by $81 million, and they reference technological improvements as one of the reasons for making that case. Has the OSS been consulted, or have you provided any advice to validate these so-called technological improvements? And if so, can you just give us a bit of an idea of what the scope is that the company has in mind?
We haven't personally been asked by ERA to validate it, no. I presume the technological improvements that are in place includes things such as a brine concentrator, which have been commissioned. That massively reduces the inventory of processed water in place over time, so that's an expenditure that's occurred. I'm not exactly sure what the 81 million refers to in their annual report. In relation to the rehabilitation bond, our role is to technically assess the amended plan that occurs every year on the 31st of March. Once that process is complete each year, that process then goes to an independent costing company who then provide Department of Industries an independent cost, which then puts in place a bond which is held in trust and cash. We're satisfied that the technical side is complete each year, and the bond itself, which is in place, is held in cash and bank guarantees by the Commonwealth Government. So whether ERA have reported themselves that they need to seek support from Rio Tinto or not in their annual report is really a matter for them. We're satisfied the money that's in place held in bond by the Commonwealth Government.
Just to be clear, it doesn't say that. I'm not implying that it says they're going to have to go to the parent company. They don't identify where the funding could come from. They just say they may need it. So I don't want to be accused of verballing the company, that's all. But we've been through this before on a couple of occasions. Can you just explain to me the basis for your confidence that the company has set aside enough money for rehabilitation when the company says if Three Deeps is not developed, we may not have enough money? When the company expresses in black and white concerns that they may have an unfunded liability in rehabilitation, how can you sit here and express confidence when the company itself can't express that confidence?
Well, my confidence is in the fact that we've technically reviewed the amended plan each year, and that plan is costed separately to the company's finances. The company's finances are a matter for themselves. We hold, or the Commonwealth hold, a bond.
How much do you hold at the present time?
I believe it's in the order of 300 million, but you'd have to direct those questions to the Department of Industry. They're the ones who hold the bond, and they're the appropriate people to talk to.
But that's the order of magnitude in cash and bank guarantees, you said?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So it's no real concern to you that the company says if they don't get to expand this mine, that they may not have enough money?
I don't believe that's exactly what they've said, but it's not a concern in that we, as I've said, we each year go through the process of planning a rehabilitation to the highest technical level, and then that's costed independently. So that provides me with enough satisfaction that there is a bond in place or funding in place to rehabilitate, regardless of ERA's financial position.
Does the 300 million... Oh,
One second.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, was that? Okay. Does the $300 million, just the kind of headline legal obligations of the company, the $300 million or whatever the exact amount is, that is required to bring that site back up such that it could be reincorporated into the World Heritage Area?
Yes,
that is your
that's
understanding? Okay. But just to confirm for us, they're downgrading their rehabilitation liability by the $81 million. You're assuming it's the brine concentrators, but you weren't asked to go and check.
Their downgrading is their own costing. That has nothing to do with the bond that is set by the Commonwealth.
Okay.
But presumably whatever changes they have made, and Mr McAllister can correct me if I get this wrong, presumably whatever changes they have made are incorporated in their updated annual plan for rehabilitation,
Yeah.
which is then assessed by the department or by the OSS and then separately and independently costed.
That's correct.
Okay. But you haven't at this stage, it's the 2014 annual report, it's not been on the table for that long, I guess. You haven't at this stage gone back then and assessed their numbers, but that would be something that you would have to do.
No, we don't assess ERA's numbers, no. We assess the technical veracity of their management plan for rehabilitation based on the crash closure at 31st of March each year.
Okay, and
That's
what it
independently
costs is
costed,
completely
so that's
outside your
nothing to do with ERA's cost.
Well, what the rehabilitation plan costs is something that is assessed, but assessed not by the OSS, but by an independent audit, and that is then assessed against the bond, as Mr McAllister has said.
That's correct.
We don't assess ERA's corporate finances,
Yeah.
Senator.
And I think, Senator Birmingham, one of the things that I thought I'd asked you to take on notice, which was not your understanding, was who the third-party auditor was. Can I just make sure that that goes into the
Certainly.
post box?
We can do that. Again,
I don't think that's
and we'll do
state
that, Senator, because I don't want to push you from committee to committee, although, again, that may be a contract that is issued by the Department of Industry and Science.
Right.
Yeah. But
Presumably not a national security secret.
no, indeed, and that's right. The department can talk to the Department of Industry and Science. I'm just being clear to you that if you're wanting to come back
Where it's tendered
at
out
another
from.
stage and ask questions, once we've given you that answer about how that procurement is undertaken or what work they do, then we'd have to take all of those on notice next time around, because our department won't necessarily instantly know those answers, and you'd be better off going to the Department of Industry and Science.
All right, thank you, Senator Birmingham. Can you tell us the status of the Ranger closure plan then, since we've sort of started getting into that issue? Have any works under that plan commenced or concluded?
In relation to the amended plan, yes, certainly the construction of the brine concentrator, that's one significant component. The capping of pit 1 is currently underway, so there's a certain amount of works that have been done in relation to that. But outside of that, the remainder, the bulk of the works, which in costing terms, the bulk of the works really relates to the reshaping of the landform and the treatment of processed water. So that's still a major cost that's ahead of the company. So at this point in time, they've not completed those tasks.
All right, thank you. So are there specific studies relating to mine closure that still need to be either initiated or completed?
Certainly in relation to research, the setting of closure criteria is well underway. A lot of the work that the Environmental Research Institute of the Supervising Scientist undertakes is in relation to setting those parameters, and that'll be a process that goes on for the next probably 3 to 5 years. And the process of setting those closure criteria ultimately guide the closure plans for Ranger, where the siting of stockpiles go,
Yeah.
processed water, tailings in pits, etc.
Yeah. Maybe 5. Do you want to take us to a break?
Well, I'm happy, if it's only 5, I'm happy to continue.
All right, I'll move along, try and close it out. Those criteria, I'm presuming, would be public? They're not going to be commercial in confidence or anything like that?
I don't know at this point in time whether they'll necessarily be public. Certainly not commercially in confidence. It's just something that we're working through with the Mine Site Technical Committee and various subcommittees of the Mine Site Technical Committee. There's nothing that's particularly confidential about those.
Yeah.
We just haven't discussed the issue of releasing them publicly.
All right, could I just invite you to have that discussion with the MTC and bring
Sure.
that back for next time, which I guess would be after the next budget? And when are the criteria expected to be finalised, or are they contingent on the establishment of 3 deeps?
Oh, certainly not contingent on the establishment of 3 deeps. The criteria will be finalised depending on the relevant importance to the closure, I guess the closure timelines that Ranger have in place. For instance, surface water is one of our key criteria that we need to address because a lot of the other criteria come back from surface water. So that's one of the first ones that should be ready, and that should be ready, I suspect, in the next year.
Yeah.
The flow-on criteria for that, then, depending on what activities ERA are undertaking in their timeline, will set when those criteria are needed, because they need the criteria to design the landforms, etc.
All right. I wonder maybe whether I could, just because time's a little short, whether I could ask you to put to us on notice your expected timeline for when the various components would be set down and either made public or at least put to the MTC.
I can take that on notice, yes.
Yeah, like even explaining it as you've done there for the
I
kind of order in
think
which
if I can
rolls out
explain
stuff
it
for.
on notice, that's probably the best way.
Yeah, thanks.
Because it's a bit of a fluid thing depending on ERA's current priorities in terms of closure.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about those then. So a couple of recent company statements included in the 2014 annual report have indicated the company has a desire to mine past their legally mandated end of lease date of 2021. So the company wants to do that. That's between itself, its shareholder, and that's a corporate decision that you're not responsible for. How does that uncertainty impact on your work within the OSS with the company towards closure and rehabilitation?
We're working on the premise that the mine milling ceases at 2021 and that the mine needs to be rehabilitated by 2026. The timelines that are in place that we're dealing with are based on those strict deadlines.
So everything that you're working on is entirely consistent with that legal obligation?
Yes.
And the company's decisions about extension of lease, that's really outside your
That's
ambit?
correct. Yes.
All right, that's helpful, thank you. Just finally then, I want to ask some fairly specific questions on environmental monitoring and off-lease impacts on Kakadu. Obviously, your whole mandate and the company's obligation is that there be no off-site contamination outside the project area. There have been, in the past, there's monitoring data in 2014 and earlier indicating that sulphates and electrical conductivity readings at monitoring stations in Gullangal Creek, which are outside the Ranger project area, have escalated past identified trigger values and do show clear upward trends. Firstly, do you agree with that premise?
No, Gullangal Creek's actually within the Ranger project area. The elevated EC levels we are seeing are specific to a tributary named GCT2. Gullangal
Just
Creek
slow
tributary
that
2.
down for us, sorry.
Yep. Are in relation to a tributary to the west of the tailings dam called GCT2. We've noticed over a number of years that there are elevated salts within that tributary that are contributing to spikes that we do see downstream in Gullangal. None of those spikes have triggered our ecotox limits. So to that extent, there's been no adverse impact to Kakadu National Park.
Okay.
We're working with the mining company on trying to identify the source of those
It's going to come to that
EC
next.
spikes. And at this point, we certainly haven't concluded to their origins, but one of the things that has occurred after discussion with the company is that they've instituted essentially what's called a cut-off trench to the west of the northwest part of the tailings dam, which is where the GCT2 sources its catchment from. That cut-off trench is designed to extract water from the shallow groundwater and hopefully reduce the elevated EC readings we're getting in the creek. And to date, the water that's been extracted from that cut-off trench generally exhibits qualities similar to that of runoff from waste rock, which is not surprising given the tailings dam is constructed out of 100% of waste rock. So hopefully this cut-off trench will have the effect of reducing those values in the creek. Obviously we're fairly early into the wet season and it'll take a good wet season's monitoring data to be able to assess that. And as far as this wet season goes, it's been a fairly poor wet season, so conclusions at the end of this wet season may need to go into next wet season to come up with something definitive.
Okay. So your two potential contamination pathways are runoff from waste rock piles or groundwater seepage?
Yes.
Or a combination of the two?
That's correct.
How long do you anticipate before you will actually know where that's coming from?
The source itself is quite difficult to pick. The contaminant levels that you get from waste rock runoff exhibit values that are similar to other sources from around site. I guess without a definitive link to where the source is, our major concern is actually ensuring that whatever the source is, that it's being cut off and not impacting on the creek.
You need to identify what it is. And I don't have a map of the project area in front of me, but it's my understanding that that creek does extend into the, well off the project area and into the park. Are you disputing that?
Downstream from the mine site, yes, but where we're seeing the elevated levels is just adjacent to the tailings dam. Our downstream site, Galunga Creek downstream, is not seeing the same elevated levels.
It has seen elevated levels though. It's not that the water contamination stops at
below our limits.
below your trigger levels. Okay. I might place some more material on notice, but I'm probably testing the patience of the chair. Thanks again for coming down.
Thank you, Senator Ludlam. Senator Sen?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, how many people are employed in the Supervising Scientist Division?
Our current ASL is 46.
46. And Mr McAllister, your position as the Supervising Scientist, what's the tenure? Are you on a contract or are you
I'm
ongoing?
just a regular public servant.
Regular public servant, okay. And with the work that the division does, and particularly that you do, kind of how much of it is kind of reactionary to the advice asked of you, and how much is it of it is kind of your own research that you
in terms of persons or in terms of
work
project?
yeah.
Yeah, we have two parts to the supervising scientist. One's called the Office of the Supervising Scientist, and they're the people who deal, I guess, in what you might determine as a reactionary component. That includes four dedicated technical staff. They also manage our operations as well, which at this point in time includes another 6 to 8 staff. And that's essentially the business unit that manages our facilities both in Darwin and in Jabiru. In addition to that, we have what's called the Environmental Research Institute of the Supervising Scientist, and that has about 33 staff who are dedicated to undertaking research projects in the Alligator Rivers region with a specific remit of protection of that region from uranium mining.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr McAllister and Dr Wright. And the committee will now suspend until 10:50.